Daddy's hammer. Don't hurt him.
Everybody, thank you guys for joining the channel. So, I just want to go ahead and give my honest review of Ironheart, the last 3 episodes. I did a review on the first 3. Like I said, it was mid-tier. I put it along the lines with like Hawkeye. Uh, you know, like it's okay, but it's not Secret Invasions. Secret Invasions was just terrible. Um, all right, so there's parts of it. Like I said, there's parts of it just like the first 3 episodes. I do like the finale. I thought the finale was good. We got the introduction of Mephisto, which I thought it was pretty interesting that this was the show, or this was the time to introduce him and show his face. I thought that if anything, we would have got him in WandaVision, right? Especially that being kind of the start of the phase. It would have been really interesting if they would have went that route, right? However, we're going to get him going in the future for sure. Going to play in with Doctor Strange, Cleo. Mephisto is going to play a huge part, and that's what's so crazy is that we get him in at the end of this show, because I don't think the show's going to get a season 2. I've been even reading reports that it's most likely going to be canceled, and I understand why. But however, for 6 episodes overall, telling the story of Riri Wilson, I think that it was, like I said, mid tier. It did get better at the end. I did like the hood. The hood was interesting. The actor Anthony Ramos, I believe his name was, killed it, man. He really did. I thought that, and he was a villain you almost kind of sympathize with, right? Especially when you found out kind of like what his ultimate plan, right? And finally achieving that, which I mean, like doing it the wrong way, homie. But also, his dad kind of passed him out, right? At 12 years old. That's some cold blooded shit. Uh, and then you got Riri losing, of course, her AI version of her best friend, and then making a deal with Mephisto to get her back, right? Which kind of leaves in a cliffhanger going into season 2. But like I said, I don't think there's going to be season 2. Reports that I've read also say that there's not going to be a season 2, most likely. So it's it's interesting that they played him at the end, right? But before we get to Mephisto, just talking about the show, you know, this is a story of Riri Wilson, a young girl, from Chicago, genius level brain, right? Building things like, they try to compare it to a Tony Stark. But one thing that I want to before I go further, one thing is she bitched about not having the money and this and that to be able to build the products that she has. Okay, understandable, relatable statement, right? For most people, maybe with ideas like that, right? Okay, I just want you to think that our man, my homie, R.I.P. Tony Stark, built a suit from scrap metal, homie, to get out of imprisonment. He didn't have no money. Just remember that. The GOAT, Tony Stark, baby. The GOAT. So, all right, digging into the last 3 episodes, Riri, she, of course, we find out that Obadiah Stane's son, played by the guy from like Beautiful Creatures, and he was also Han Solo in the Solo prequel. He shows up. He's Obadiah Stane's son, has a bunch of money. He's funding Riri. They're building something together. They build a relationship, right? At the end of at episode 3. Well, going into episode 4, he essentially gets framed, right, for a crime that Riri and her DEI team went into, like this heist that went wrong when Riri's pretty much was trying to be a hero, and so now, of course, I think the hood knows, and they end up framing what's his name? Okay. Which some of the story doesn't make sense. I don't know why. And then all of a sudden he has this hatred for Riri and this and that. Like, I understand. Maybe Riri got him into it. Maybe that's why he's had hatred, right? But, like, dude, she didn't do nothing personally to you. Um, okay, but that's besides the point, right? Which they take a great actor and they waste him, by the way. His story arc, he ends up getting injected with, like, and he puts himself, and now he has, like, controls electricity. And then him and Riri fight. She whoops his ass. And he's just like, she kind of shows mercy, and he's just like, I have all this anger. I don't know where to put it. This won't be the last you see me. Which is definitely some, like, comic book villain shit, but, like, first of all, like, dude, she didn't do nothing to you. But that's besides the point. So then she ends up getting into quarrels with the Hood. The Hood, of course, takes control of, like I said, his dad's estate, has billions and billions. Well, now he's unhappy. He's still unhappy, right? Well, he's not getting everything he wanted, right? Well, of course, has a flashback, and this is where we get Mephisto, which Sacha Baron Cohen, I really do hope they keep him on as Mephisto. They could have possibly do something different in the future. Um, because this is his human form that we do see him as Sacha Baron Cohen. So he could show up as multiple different forms, which he does. However, I do like the idea of Sacha Baron Cohen. I think that he's compelling enough to just kind of be a person who just jumps from project to project, and he's kind of whispering, he's kind of digging into people's ears, making deals here and there, right? Which I think he could possibly even play a part into Spider-Man's Brand New Day, which would be very interesting, right? Very, very interesting. So I'm curious to see, where they take him. Could he even be, maybe hear me out here, could he even possibly be Marvel's next baddie after Doomsday? That'd be interesting, right? Of course, I would love to see more of Doctor Doom, right? Because Doctor Doom is like the freaking man, right? Especially when it comes to villains. He's like Marvel's one of their best villains. However, what if Mephisto is the next baddie, and then they're slowly introducing him, similar to what they did with Thanos, kind of rewrite, kind of what they did. They fumbled with the whole Kang dynasty and the Kang storyline and how that wasn't falling into place, and the terrible movies that we were getting that were kind of based on this multiversal madness that we've been getting. So, man, I'm really curious to see how he plays forward. But overall, for the series, guys, I, if you're a Marvel fan, give it a go. It does get better towards the end. The Hood is a great actor. I think he's a good enough character. You kind of like him a little bit, right? And you're curious what he's got going on. But girl who plays Riri, she does a good job. Like I said, I think she does a good job for what they wrote for her character. Um, it's cheesy at times, but guys, I give this overall like a 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10, I think is pretty fair. It's you could say it's above average, right? Average is 5, so it's a 6 out of 10, guys. I wouldn't say it's any better than that, but I definitely wouldn't say it's any worse. I think six is a good. Give it a go. It's not something you'll probably rewatch and you'll say, "Oh man, I can't wait to rewatch Ironheart." Let's just be honest, right? However, everybody's cup of tea is a little bit different. But that is all I got for you guys. Until next time, peace out.